Welcome, learner, to today's deep dive. Quick question for you. Have you ever been, entirely alone in a quiet room, maybe working late or just reading a book, and suddenly you feel this distinct physical sensation that you aren't actually alone?
Oh, like that subtle prickle at the back of your neck?
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
And, you're not crazy. We usually expect our minds to process the world with this absolute engineering level precision, right? Like you hear a sound in the kitchen, you walk in, you see the cat knocked over a glass, and your brain just points and says, yep, there it is. Cause and effect.
You're right. It's very binary. It's safe. I mean, we are biologically wired to seek out that visible, easily categorized reality. The human brain is essentially this massive pattern recognition machine. It loves neat little logical boxes because, well, predictability equals survival.
But then you step into the world of isolation.
Yeah.
You step into late nights and deep silence, and suddenly that cause and effect machine in our brains just it completely breaks down.
Oh, completely.
We're thrust into a perceptual landscape that is completely murky.
It is the absolute definition of diagnostic muddy waters. And by that, I mean the clinical gray area where objective neurology ends and subjective terror begins.
Which is terrifying.
It really is. We have robust biological explanations for stress and fatigue, sure, but we don't have an X-ray to diagnose the shadows in the corner of your room or, the sudden drop in temperature you feel when you're supposedly entirely alone.
And that brings us to our mission for today. If you're listening to this right now, we are about to enter some genuinely fascinating territory. Our analysis today is based on excerpts from a show called The Shadow in the Silence.
It's a great source.
It really is. And we are going to explore the incredibly unsettling boundary between psychological exhaustion and genuinely disturbing reality.
Right?
So over the next few minutes, we're examining 3 distinct scenarios presented in these clips. So we have 2 late-night work environments and a rather chilling discovery in a new house. We're going to uncover why the silence of the night seems to play tricks on us. Or, and this is the crux of the whole thing.
The big question.
Yeah, if it's actually playing tricks at all.
I will just say right now, if you think you have a firm grasp on where this discussion is headed, just hold that thought.
Oh, yeah.
Because by the time we wrap up, your fundamental assumptions about what we categorize as imaginary and what we accept as real, well, they are going to be completely challenged by a brilliant twist in the narrative.
I can't wait for that part. But let's get right into it. We begin with a scenario from the audio that is just, well, it's so universally relatable. Burning the midnight oil.
We've all been there.
Exactly. It's a dramatized point of view in the text.
Yeah.
So a worker is alone in a quiet office, well after hours. Papers are scattered everywhere. The laptop is casting that harsh, glowing light. And there is a loud ticking clock in the background.
Which are the quintessential markers of cognitive isolation. You have the low hum of an empty building, which essentially acts as white noise, right?
Right.
It's just starving the brain of its usual sensory inputs.
So he finally finishes his work, stretches his arms, and exhales this massive, deep breath of relief. He actually says, Alhamdulillah, those were tough days.
You can practically feel the tension leaving his body in that moment.
Really can. But then, right at that moment of triumph, the atmosphere violently shifts.
Just instantly.
Yeah. The text notes that the silence stops being peaceful. It starts to feel like it is watching him. He calls out, hello? Gets absolutely no response, forces a smile, and immediately rationalizes it. He tells himself he's just tired.
Of course he does.
Okay, let's unpack this, because there's a very specific mechanism at play here. Have you ever stood in a large auditorium or like a theater stage after the entire audience has left and the lights are mostly off?
Oh, yeah. It's an incredibly striking environment. The acoustics are completely different.
Exactly. It feels unnaturally charged. It is physically empty, but it feels expectant, heavy.
Like the silence itself has a physical weight to it.
Yes. A weight that is literally pressing against your eardrums.
Yeah.
That is exactly what this worker is experiencing. The heavy, watching silence of an empty office.
What's fascinating here is the precise psychological pivot the narrative highlights. Think about the timeline you just laid out. The worker doesn't feel this paranoia while he is frantically working.
Right. He's totally fine before that.
He feels it the exact second he finishes. The exact moment that deep relief washes over him, it instantly transforms into paranoia.
But wait, why does that happen? Like, why wouldn't he feel paranoid when he was stressed out and his heart was already racing?
because of how our cognitive load functions. The original speakers in the clip actually comment on this, noting how when you are alone, your mind starts playing tricks on you. But let's look at the science of it.
Do it.
When you're deeply focused, your brain's task-positive network is highly engaged. You have a singular goal. The moment the task is gone, your brain experiences a sudden drop in adrenaline, and your sensory awareness just aggressively expands outward to fill the void. Yeah, it's an evolutionary defense mechanism called hypervigilance. The brain, lacking a specific task, suddenly scans the environment for threats.
Let me challenge that, though. The text asks us to question whether this is pure exhaustion. Like the mind misfiring because it's tired.
Yeah.
Or if the worker has suddenly become attuned to an actual environmental shift that he was just too busy to notice 5 minutes ago. If it's just hypervigilance, it's all in his head. But what if the drop in cognitive load simply allowed him to finally perceive something that was genuinely standing in the room with him?
And that is the brilliant ambiguity of this first scenario. It leaves it entirely hanging.
It really does.
One of the hosts in the clip asks, what if it's not just your mind? And then, rather than answering it, they immediately pivot to the second scenario.
Which is such a good transition, because if the office worker's paranoia was just an internal feeling triggered by a drop in adrenaline, what happens when that feeling gains external physical weight?
Right.
The story tests this exact boundary next, and it takes the tension and, frankly, cranks it up to an 11.
It moves from a vibe in the air to something undeniably tangible.
So we are introduced to a student. He's studying late in this dimly lit room, books stacked high everywhere, and I love the specific detail included about what he is studying.
Oh, it's so specific.
He's muttering notes to himself about social skills, relationships, environment, responsibilities.
It deliberately grounds the scene in the mundane. He's focusing on these very human sociological concepts, analyzing how people interact in the real, predictable world.
Right. But then, just like the office worker, he feels something is wrong. He pauses, looks up, and calls out, "Hello." He even laughs nervously and admits out loud that he definitely needs sleep.
He tries to brush it off as mere exhaustion.
Okay.
But the environment refuses to let him maintain that rationalization.
Because things immediately escalate. He hears a faint sound, like a whisper. He turns around sharply and says, "Who's there?" Nothing.
Ugh, the tension.
Then a soft knock. He actually says, "Come in," which, I mean, is a terrifying reflex.
But it's an automatic social reflex. He's literally studying social responsibilities.
That's true.
His brain is primed to respond politely to a knock, even when logic dictates no one should be there.
But then the door creaks open slightly, and no one enters. He stands up, his heart is racing. He says, "This isn't funny." He hears another sound behind him, spins around, and nothing.
Just empty space.
Yeah, but the narrative explicitly notes that the air grows noticeably colder. He tries to distract himself, grabs his notes, mutters, "Focus, focus," and then he drops his pen.
This part is so good.
He bends to pick it up, and that is when he sees it on the floor. A shadow. And it is not his shadow. He looks up and asks, "Who are you?" And the screen cuts to black.
It is an absolute masterclass in the architecture of rising tension.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though, because the text is almost daring us to keep using the exhaustion excuse. Let me play devil's advocate here for a second, for you and for the listener.
Go for it.
Sleep deprivation causes actual visual and auditory hallucinations, right? When you're studying at 3 a.m, your brain is starved for REM sleep.
That's very true.
So why couldn't the wrong shadow or the opening door just be an extreme neurological misfire rather than an external entity? Like, at what point does a tired brain stop just imagining vague sounds and start manifesting physical things?
Well, if we trace the deliberate sensory escalation in the text, it actually answers your question.
Okay.
In the first story, the worker simply felt a shift in the atmosphere. In the second, the atmosphere actively interacts with the student. It moves sequentially from the auditory, like a vague whisper, a soft knock, which, yes, could easily be an auditory hallucination or pareidolia, where the brain finds patterns in random noise.
Right. Totally plausible.
But then it moves to the physical and environmental. The mechanical creak of the door, the objective drop in ambient room temperature.
Yeah, I mean, you can't hallucinate a literal draft of cold air from an opening door.
Precisely. And finally, it lands on the visual, the undeniable proof of an autonomous shadow. The narrative connects this back to its overarching question. What happens when someone studying alone isn't really alone?
It's so unsettling.
It is. The exhaustion theory holds water when it's just a vague feeling of dread. But when you are looking at a shadow that moves independently of your own body, the story forces you, the observer, to abandon the comfort of psychological rationalization.
You can't just explain it away anymore.
No, you can no longer rely on the diagnosis of a misfiring brain. You are forced to confront the presence of an external entity.
The hosts in our source audio admit this gave them chills, and they actually debate which scenario is real and which isn't.
Yeah.
But before they can resolve it, they throw an absolute curveball that completely shifts the entire framework of our deep dive.
It really does change everything.
Up until now, these first two stories lived in this ambiguous space of late-night, dramatized exhaustion. They feel like modern folklore or, ghost stories told to scare each other.
Yeah.
But then the discussion moves to a third scenario, and it's deliberately framed completely differently.
We move from the dramatized space of late-night paranoia into the concrete, daytime reality of a documentary.
Exactly. They tell us explicitly, this isn't a story. This is a concrete, real-life incident featuring tangible evidence sent into them by a guest.
Right.
The setup is simple. A buyer receives the keys to a new house. Everything seems completely normal. A house is supposed to be a sanctuary, a controlled environment.
Of course.
But then, behind a door, they find writing, handwritten text. And the guest in the clip emphasizes a very specific, chilling detail. It wasn't neat, it wasn't decorative, it was written in a frantic rush.
That aesthetic detail is vital to the psychology of the scene. It implies intense urgency. It shatters that feeling of a controlled sanctuary instantly.
The buyer looks up what the writing means and discovers it is a warning. A warning about being careful when leaving the house, which is already incredibly unsettling.
Unsettling is an understatement.
Right. But then they check the kitchen cabinets and they find hidden items, papers, and a mysterious bottle. Now, I have to pause here because human nature is intensely, dangerously curious.
Oh, it is our default state.
Exactly. Finding a hidden, mysterious bottle in a new house with a rushed warning on the door. Leaving that bottle alone goes against our evolutionary wiring.
Completely.
It's like ignoring a distinct rustle in the tall grass. Our brains are fundamentally designed to investigate anomalies to ensure our survival. To consciously choose not to investigate requires overriding our most basic neurological software. Every instinct demands you open it.
But they don't open it.
They don't. The text explicitly states they didn't dare.
Wow.
Instead, they contact an experienced person who comes over and advises them that certain things are better not disturbed. So what does this all mean? Why is the buyer's profound restraint, like this active choice not to open that bottle, somehow the most chilling detail of this entire deep dive?
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture, it represents a monumental paradigm shift in how we interact with the unknown.
How so?
Think about the ego of the first two characters. The office worker calls out, "Hello." The student walks toward the open door, asks who's there, and ultimately demands of the shadow, "Who are you?"
Yeah, they engage with it.
They are driven by a desperate need to investigate, to conquer, and to categorize the anomaly.
They want to shine a flashlight on it, label it, and put it in a box so they can feel safe again.
But the homebuyer does the exact opposite. The text explicitly frames this by saying, this wasn't a horror story. This actually happened.
Right.
The buyer looks at the rushed warning, looks at the hidden bottle, and realizes that satisfying their human curiosity is simply not worth the potential danger. There is a terrifying ancient wisdom in leaving the bottle undisturbed.
That is so true.
It is a profound acknowledgement of boundaries that simply shouldn't be crossed.
It's an admission that some things are real, they are dangerous, and they are completely beyond our understanding.
It requires surrendering the ego's need to know in order to guarantee survival, which, for the modern, rationally minded human, is incredibly difficult to do. We always demand an answer.
And that demand for an answer brings us perfectly to the meta twist of the whole narrative.
Here we go.
This is where the deep dive turns the mirror directly back on us. So having laid out these three distinct scenarios, the office, the student, and the new house, the speakers in our audio clip start debating.
Like anyone would.
Yeah. One of them guesses that the student's story is a real one. The other guesses the office story is real. They are essentially playing a game of spot the fiction.
Which is a brilliant psychological defense mechanism.
Right.
It's a very natural reaction to being presented with deeply unsettling narratives. We want to distance ourselves by labeling them, dissecting them, and treating them as mere stories to be solved.
But then the text drops the twist. The host of the clip says, "Surprise, neither of you got it completely right." They laugh and conclude that reality is stranger than both.
Wow.
The final takeaway from the show is that the scariest stories are actually the ones we instinctively assume are fake.
This raises an important question, particularly for anyone listening who prides themselves on being a rational, analytical thinker.
Let's hear it.
Why do we tell ourselves scary stories? We do it to put a frame around our fear, to make the terrifying manageable.
I want to challenge you, the listener, right now. How often do you immediately dismiss a bizarre, unexplained, or deeply unsettling account just because it sounds too much like a movie script?
Probably more often than we'd like to admit.
Exactly. You think, oh, the door creaked open and the room got cold. Yeah, right. I saw that in a horror film last year. It can't be real.
Right.
We use the familiar tropes of fiction to inoculate ourselves against the bizarre, terrifying realities of the actual world.
And that is the core philosophical argument of the text. It argues that our default logical baseline, this comforting idea that all unexplained things are simply imaginary, simply our tired minds misfiring or playing tricks on us, might actually be a deeply flawed and arrogant way of navigating the world.
It's an elaborate defense mechanism. We enthusiastically categorize the strange as fiction, because if we accept it as fact, well, the world suddenly becomes a much more dangerous, entirely unpredictable place. We lose control.
When the narrative warns that not everything unexplained is imaginary, it is directly asking us to dismantle that defense mechanism, to accept that the murky waters are just as real and just as present as the dry land we prefer to walk on.
And that really brings us to the core takeaway for your daily life. The real value of examining the shadow and the silence isn't just to enjoy a good scare or a spooky story before bed.
No, not at all.
It is a profound, slightly uncomfortable exercise in recognizing our own mental filters. We learn how unbelievably quickly we will rationalize the unexplained, simply so we can feel safe enough to go back to sleep.
We tell ourselves it was just the wind, just the house settling as the temperature drops, just a trick of the light caused by a passing car.
Anything to make it make sense.
Exactly. We apply logic like a bandage over something we don't want to look at.
We rely on that metaphorical cause and effect machine, demanding a clear, jagged white line of logic for absolutely everything we experience. But sometimes the machine is broken.
Yeah.
Sometimes there is no logic. There's just a shadow on the floor that isn't yours.
And a hidden bottle in a cabinet that you should never, ever open.
So, we want to leave you with a lingering thought, building strictly on the narrative's closing warning that reality is stranger than fiction. The next time you are alone in the dead of night, burning the midnight oil in an empty room, and you hear a soft knock,
or you feel a sudden, inexplicable chill brush past you in the air,
consider this. Are you dismissing it because logic dictates that you are entirely alone? Or are you dismissing it because acknowledging it means accepting the terrifying possibility that you aren't?
Thank you for exploring these dark corners of human psychology with us.
Yes, thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Stay curious, stay sharp, and we'll catch you next time.